Hey everybody, back to the podcast. Welcome back. Well, yes, that's the thing we should say. Welcome back, not back to the podcast. Hey, I'm Katie. I'm your host. Welcome, fresh RNs, not so fresh RNs. Today we're going to talk about the Doctorate of Nursing Practice. So this kind of goes off of our previous episode on the MSN role. I'm sorry, not role, degree. We were very clear when we differentiated between MSN is a degree, not a role. And we talked about the roles you can do with an MSN. And we're going to do that here. So let's talk DNP. Before we get into my DNP discussion, quick call out to my new resource, a nursing school workbook. So it is a planner, a thing to help you figure out which nursing school you want to go to, all the way from LPN, BSN, RN, MSN, DNP, PhD. We can put all our possibilities in there, rank different schools that we're researching, put in the little details to help us compare objectively on a piece of, well, I guess it's not a piece of paper, on on a Google sheet, this school versus this school. And it kind of helps put your thoughts and information in one spot. I have some things for reflection, questions for you to really write down what you are thinking, and it's a big decision, so it helps you get all that out of your brain and into one objective place where you can look at it and say, okay, I want to make this decision to go with this school to become ultimately have this role, and I'm doing it from a balanced place between thoughtful, objective, helpful information and what I'm passionate about. Because I think when we can go with feeling and passion too much, that we might end up in something that ultimately is not the best decision, maybe going to a school that's too expensive or a role that's maybe we don't want to do at the end of the day because we like the prestige it carried, but the reality of it is not really going to be something you can do for 20 years. Let's put that all on a paper. Let's Google sheet, the Google sheet, and then we're going to make a smart decision based upon that. And when you sign up for that, I'm going to send you some more emails that kind of help you work through that decision making, just to empower you to make some good choices. All right, freshRN.com/planner. Link in the description of the episode. Shall we get started? We shall. DNP, Doctorate of Nursing Practice, terminal clinical degree. So that means that's the highest you can go, babe. You can't get more after a DNP, okay? But there is another degree, your PhD, which is different, okay? There's two terminal degrees that you can get, a Doctorate of Nursing Practice and a PhD in nursing. Highest aspects of education in nursing, but very, very different, okay? And this is all about, in the DNP role, applying evidence to practice, the application. Here's some evidence that somebody else came up with. I'm going to take that and I am going to apply that to practice. The PhD comes up with the evidence and comes up with what needs to be studied and how can we study it and what's the best way to do this and blah blah blah. And then the DNP is taking that very valuable necessary information and applying it in the real world. Okay. So DNPs will lead system change. They will say, hey, here's this research, this wonderful research these amazing PhDs did. We need to change how we do X, Y, and Z. Here's this policy. Here's this, we need to stop doing this and do this. So this isn't happening, but let's say all of a sudden all this research said, okay, the best mode of care is for every single patient to have their own nurse. Okay, that's great if evidence says that. And that's great if we could afford that. Let's say in a perfect world, we could afford that, like that hospitals could afford one-on-one care for every single patient that came through the doors. Let's say that was realistic. To implement change like that, you would need DNP prepared nurses saying, okay, here's how we can actually go from a metric of 7-1 to 1-1. Here's the things you need to consider. Here's how we're going to apply this research to practice. Okay. You also can function in the APRN role of nurse practitioner at the highest level with the DNP. You can, but the MSN is still a appropriate step to take to become an NP, but more and more hospitals and nurses are going towards that DNP step um, to take care of patients in that nurse practitioner role. And if we're talking hospitals that are competitive research facilities, specialized units where they have a lot of people applying for a few positions, they're going to push towards that DNP prepared nurse practitioner to be one of their providers. I mean, they just, because supply, demand. All right, if I have plenty of people and I've got this pool of people who have their doctorate versus their MSN, okay, I'm going to go with a doctorate. And their education landscape, maybe 10 years from now or whatever it is, the people are really pushing for the nurse practitioner minimum degree to be a DNP. We're not, that change is not feasible yet just because of supply and demand, but that could be what we are looking at in the future, almost like the RN level of ADN versus BSN. It is ideal if all nurses had their bachelor's, but we don't have enough people apply, like going to nursing school, to just say no more ADNs, only BSN. We don't have enough spaces in BSN programs, right? So we can't, that's not a change you can do overnight, but that is something to consider. So to refresh the hospital leadership ladder hierarchy, you got your bedside nurse who's managed or overseen by a nurse manager. This then, so let's say you have 50 nurses on a unit and there's 10 units, right? Those 10 units all have one nurse manager. And so now we have 10 nurse managers. Well, a nursing director may manage 3 or 4 of them, and another director might manage 3 or 4 of them. So then we have maybe 3 or 4 nursing directors, and those nursing directors are managed by the CNO. And ultimately, the CNO, Chief Nursing Officer, is responsible for literally everyone, but their direct report is that one person below them. So you, as a bedside nurse, report to your manager. Your manager reports to a director. The director reports to the CNO. There may be some other, depending on your hospital, some other little roles in between or something, but that's generally what it looks like. And when we start looking at director and above, DNP at a good hospital is what they're going to require, and what's going to make sense to have that level of leadership and responsibility. And if CNO, you got to have that DNP, people. You could also work clinical faculty, quality improvement consultant, independent, population health specialist, policy advisor, program director. These are higher level leadership jobs that you would absolutely be qualified for with a DNP. It's a degree that really opens doors if you want to make an impact beyond the bedside, but still stay grounded in the clinical world. Okay. So why would someone want a DNP? Few key reasons. Really depends on your goals. If you want to like leadership and want to expand beyond the bedside, going to that director executive level, DNP is becoming more and more common and in some cases expected. So if you're fresh out of nursing school in your early 20s and you're like, you know what, when I'm later in my career, I really want to be a CNO. I really want to, be at the top of the food chain here or somewhere up there. It would make a lot of sense to pursue the DNP earlier. Now, it does give you these tools that are necessary to lead change, manage systems, and make data-driven decisions. Because as you get, higher up into that nursing hierarchy, you can't just say, oh, I think it would make more sense if we did this instead of this. Well, to get the money to do it, the resources to do it, you have to demonstrate that it is economically and practically feasible. And you need data for that. Oh, and it's safe. You have to demonstrate, is this, when we're talking about implementing change on a system level, on a hospital level, not even a nursing unit level, but on a hospital level, implementing change is not fast or easy, and you need to have data to support changing from one thing to the next, even if it is the right thing. We need to demonstrate, hey, if we're going to put all this time, money, and resources into moving from doing it this way to this way, we have to know for sure that that's going to be the right decision. And that's where the data comes in. So also for APRNs, like we've mentioned before, advanced practice registered nurses, like clinical nurse specialists, nurse practitioners, that DNP really helps deepen your knowledge, increases clinical credibility, and opens doors to teaching, consulting, and leadership opportunities. Okay. And if you are considering become a CRNA, you now have to have a doctorate. Okay. There's two options. There's a regular DNP, but then there's also a DNAP, which stands for Doctor of Nurse Anesthesia Practice. The DNP is typically offered through a school of nursing, includes more general nursing leadership coursework, and might be a bit more versatile if you decide, hey, I don't want to always be in an anesthesia role. Maybe I want to move into teaching or something like that. Might be a little more versatile. But the DNAP is usually offered through a school of medicine or anesthesia and is more focused solely on nurse anesthesia and is more clinically tailored. Both meet requirement for CRNA licensure. They're just different structure depending upon the school. But overall, DNP is for nurses who really want to stay rooted in clinical practice, but also may want to lead, educate, and improve healthcare beyond one shift, one patient, one unit. Okay. And it's about impact at scale. Okay. And preparing for kinds of roles that shape systems and not just responding to them. So here, let's go through a question that a lot of people ask. Should I get an MSN or should I get a DNP? So let's say that you have a bachelor's of science in nursing, and you are interested in higher education. You want to go to graduate school, but you're not sure what degree makes the most sense. Because maybe this is not what you're supposed to say as a clinical or as an educator, but like, is an MSN enough? Like, I don't want to get more school and more debt if I don't have to. Like, I want to get the education I need to perform a specific role. And while it would be lovely if I had a lot of time and endless budget to get the most education possible, that's not the real world. We have to pay for this stuff and we have to take time away from our families. A lot of us, when we are thinking graduate level, we may have already started a family. We may be kind of settling down and not in our early mid 20s where moving is doable. You're in that grind it out hustle like aspect of life. You're in more of a like, all right, I'm kind of settling. I don't have the capacity to like work 12-hour shifts and then do 3 days of 12-hour clinicals and then coursework on top of it. I don't want to do that if I don't have to. So whether or not an MSN is enough really, really, really depends on your goals. And that's why I really am shouting out my own creation of my workbook, because the goal that you pick out that aligns with your values, that aligns with what you want to do, really dictates this. You can absolutely become a CNS, an NP, or another APRN with a master's degree, and it is still very much accepted and respected across healthcare settings. But keep in mind that educational shift is towards the DNP, especially for nurse practitioner roles. Okay? So that is something to consider because depending upon the market, a lot of nurse practitioner roles might be oversaturated. There might be 20 applicants for 2 positions, and they really can pick from a whole bunch of people. Maybe the only people who are getting nurse practitioner jobs at this really great hospital in the town that you work in are people with existing connections and networking, and you need things to like put you over the edge. It may be advantageous to look at that DNP option. And this is especially true if you're, again, early 20s, thinking longevity. I'm thinking about being marketable in 5 to 6 years, and whatever degree I do, I'm going to do part-time and take it slow. That's great because a lot of people do that, but that does lengthen the amount of time before you're, you know, in that job market. And who knows, maybe in 5 to 7 years, it's really difficult to get a job at a good hospital without a DNP. Those are considerations that you really have to make. Um, some prestigious nursing schools that offer NP programs no longer offer MSN options. Okay. Um, and prestigious medical centers and academic centers are preferring um, DNP for more competitive roles, and NP roles. So the DNP really builds on what you learn in an MSN and adds more depth to the leadership, system thinking, policy, and evidence-based practice aspects of it. You can enter a DNP program directly from your BSN or after earning an MSN. Both paths are completely valid. Some nurses go straight through while others prefer to let me get this MSN done first, get into start practicing, and then come back later when I'm ready for the next level. You don't have to do it all at once. If you're thinking long term, you see yourself going into roles that involve teaching, leadership, or working in top tier organizations, a DNP might be the edge you need. So there are things that you can do where like you don't have to, okay, now I have to commit full time to this massive long-term investment of time and money. Let's talk about the reality of a DNP, and then I'm really excited to share some very specific thoughts with you from DNP prepared nurses. So, we want to talk about what it's really like. Okay. Yes, you can see the sales pages, which is what they are, of nursing degree programs and getting you like all excited about it. But we need to, I want the nitty gritty reality of what it's actually like to complete this program. A lot of nurses start to feel overwhelmed and unsure when we're thinking about what the reality is. The First, the length of the program depends on where you're starting, obviously, okay, right? If you are starting with a BSN, it's going to take a lot longer than if you started with an MSN. That makes sense, right? So if you're coming with a BSN, your DNP program will typically take about 3 to 4 years. If you already have an MSN, a postmaster's DNP can be about 1.5 to 2 years, depending on the program and the schedule. Okay, so if you're going full time, part time, that kind of thing. A lot of DNP programs are a lot online or hybrid, which is great for working nurses, but it's still very rigorous. You will have in-person requirements like intensives, clinical hours, project presentations. And here's a big difference between DNP and PhD. Your DNP project. So some people think, okay, if you're doing like a graduate level, you're going to have to do a dissertation. That is only for the PhD. So the dissertation is a big aspect of any PhD program. Okay, it's this long research thing. You have to defend it at the end, and if you've done so successfully, you get your PhD. DNP students complete a DNP project, and this is true for anesthesia school. Okay, so if you're doing this, isn't something just for DNP, except for CRNA school. CRNA students need to do a DNP project. It's a real world quality improvement initiative that applies evidence to practice. So it's more like a systems-based change project, something you could actually improve patient care with or operational outcomes in your workplace. Now let's talk about cost. Okay. So if you do that DNP, babe, you're going to do a big old project. So keep that in mind. And I think that's a reasonable thing to expect from a doctorate level of school. big old project on top of all the clinical hours, okay? As you can expect, DNP programs are more expensive than MSN programs. They take longer, they have a bigger financial commitment. So I really want you to use that planner to map out like tuition, hidden fees, financial aid options, and get very realistic with how doable it is in your season of life. We want to think about finances strategically, and I do talk about that in one of the emails you get, because things like student loan rate, interest rates add up a lot. There's a massive difference between a 9% and a 6%. I go through that kind of stuff specifically. We need some smart planning before we enroll. And that can be if you're maybe at your BSN and you're deciding between an MSN or a DNP. I want you to calculate the time and money it would take to get the MSN first. And then I want you to look at what it would cost for an a DNP after your MSN. Look at that. It might actually make more sense for time and finances to just do the DNP. While the DNP has the bigger price tag and the longer commitment, if we're at stacking those two degree paths, like, are we adding a bunch of money that it's going to cost in debt when you're like 1,000% sure you want that DNP? This is the stuff we need to do. Like, oh, I'm scared of that price. Yes, I would be too. But if I'm actually going to save a certain amount of money by skipping that MSN step and I'm in it to win it, baby, I know I'm going to finish this. Those are smarter financial. So if we compare the strategy with knowledge about interest rates and student loans, this makes this much more doable and reasonable. All right. Thoughts from DNP prepared nurses. So I have three kind of four. Oh my gosh, I forgot I had four. These are great. I reached out to some DNP prepared nurses and I wanted you to hear what their specialty, their experience with school was. Like I said, I'm an MSN prepared nurse. I have not done the DNP thing. I'm very knowledgeable about that, but I have not walked through it. So I want to give you the experience of four highly successful, outstanding DNP prepared nurses who are all doing different things. So let's start. Danielle Levesque. So she is the nurse from Nurse Abnormalities on Instagram. I'll put her link in the description of the episode. So here is what Danielle had to say about the DNP. She says, I earned my accelerated BSN at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis in 2011. I earned my Doctorate of Nursing Practice and Acute Care Gerontological Nurse Practitioner and Clinical Nurse Specialist certificates or certifications in 2018 from the University of Maryland. So pause the quote here. Did you hear that? She is educationally prepared to be a nurse practitioner and a clinical nurse specialist. If you listen to my MSN episode, I talked about the CNS role. I also have a separate podcast episode where I interviewed the president of the National Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists. Fascinating role. If you're not like, I don't want to go see a list of patients, but I want to be able to prescribe and I want to be able to make decisions on patient care, but I also care about big picture stuff, CNS is a phenomenal option. And I think it's so cool. I think she's the only one on my list that does both of those. So that adds time to a degree for sure. But holy moly, is this young lady marketable. Let me tell you. To have both of those, amazing. And to go to a great school. Let us resume our quote. I have been working as an acute care nurse practitioner since 2018 and recently began applying for new jobs. My acute care certification has not hindered my ability to find a job in any way. In fact, I think because I have acute care gerontology, I have countless options for employment. As far as school selection, I was happy with my selection. I encourage prospective students to attend well-known, established programs to learn if clinical placements are found by them for the school and to make an effort to have an idea of where they want to work after school to allow that to guide them through school. Pausing again, phenomenal advice there. What we've talked about before. Think about first the thing that you want to do and allow that to guide which program that you want to do. She encourages those well-known, established programs. And another thing, you're going to hear this through all these quotes, clinical placements. And when we're talking MSN and DNP level, a big challenge is finding a place to complete your clinicals. Nursing schools often do not do that. And it's important to know how much support that you will have in that decision, in that process, because if you don't have ties to a hospital with people who are going to say, yeah, you can follow me for your clinical, and you're cold calling places, that's going to make it exceptionally more difficult. And you're going to hear that in some other quotes. Resuming Danielle's quote, I have been part of hiring new nurse practitioners for almost 7 years, and it does matter where you go to school. All of the above is why I believe working as a bedside nurse prior to continuing to be an advanced practice nurse is important in determining your educational and career pathway. And that ends Danielle's quote. Side note, she worked at Cleveland Clinic. She worked at very prestigious, challenging, I think, if I remember right, CV surgery, right? I think. I can't remember exactly, but it was like a really legit, high intensity acute care job that she was obviously very qualified for, went to a great school. So good to know. All right, let's talk about Sean Dent. He got his, I'm just going to go ahead and read his quote word for word. I don't want to try to summarize it. And I will have a link to does some educational stuff on TikTok and Instagram. So I'll put a link to his, where you can learn more about him. Sean, here's his quote. I got my DNP from Gannon University. He got his MSN in 2013 from the University of Pittsburgh. I chose to pursue my Doctorate of Nursing Practice because I was interested in teaching and had a mild interest in eventual leadership roles. My DNP was in preparation for my future career. The clinically focused doctorate not only met those needs, but I was also a seasoned clinician. So it was an even easier decision to choose to go towards the DNP route over the PhD, since the DNP is clinically focused. Pause. Sean worked as a nurse practitioner with his MSN in an ICU for a very long time. I think like 15 years. I can't remember. It was over 10 years that he was working in an acute care ICU as a nurse practitioner. So when he says seasoned clinician, he means it. Okay. All right. Let's get back to his quote. I chose Gannon University because of convenience and familiarity. It was a reputable program. It was affordable. And since I paid for it out of pocket and didn't use any financial assistance compared to my other college degrees, not to mention it was completely online. When completing this terminal degree, I knew clinical hours would be a little easier to complete than my MSN, since most clinical hours were practice-based. And finding a doctorately prepared preceptor was easy to find, since many of my coworkers had their DNP. So that ends Sean's quote, and he brings up a great perspective. You know, if I'm doing clinicals, I need to find obviously a DNP prepared nurse to do them with. And most programs are going to expect you to find that individual. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk to a CRNA, right? Like, let's do that. Susan DuPont, and if you are familiar with her, she helped write the Cardiac Confidence course. Phenomenal, highly experienced nurse who worked for a long time in level 1 trauma in Michigan. Ugh, she's so smart, great with patients, loved it. I never worked with her clinically, but in an educational capacity I did. She's great. So let's start her quote. I got my BSN at Eastern Michigan University in 2013 and my DNAP from the University of Michigan in 2023. I wish I knew before I went into CRNA school that it is emotionally and mentally taxing. Having support financially, emotionally, and physically is beyond important. Having coping mechanisms for stress in place and the ability to completely stop your life for 3 years is also important. It is hard, but absolutely worth it. One thing to know about CRNA school is that you no longer can get a master's degree and you must have a doctorate level to obtain your CRNA license. But there are two options. the Doctorate in Anesthesia Practice, like we discussed, and a DNP. The biggest difference between the two is the school that they are under. DNP is typically under the School of Medicine, and it means you will write your papers in AMA format, and all of your coursework will be solely anesthesia related. Getting a DNP is through the School of Nursing. It means APA format papers and classes that might not be anesthesia related but help fulfill the DNP degree requirements. You might also take courses with other nurses getting their DNP but not specializing in anesthesia. Getting a DNP could potentially make your degree more versatile if you want to go into teaching, but DNAP currently fulfills that requirement. Thank you, Susan, for your expertise. I will also put a link to her stuff. Last one, John Russell. Okay, he helped also write and review the cardiac competence course. Great guy. I've done education with him. Me and John did for Chamberlain BSN students. We did skills days in his skills lab, and he focuses on education for nurse practitioners specifically. So let me tell you what John has to say about the DNP, and I love the way he ends this. So make sure you stay tuned. I started my NP journey with an FNP, so Family Nurse Practitioner, from Mennonite College of Nursing. That is in Illinois. In 2014, because my wife did the same program a few years prior, loved the faculty, and said I should do it too. She was right. The program was amazing, and I'm very glad I did it. But I have always been an acute care RN, so primary care was a bit of a switch for me. My first job offer was twofold. I worked in primary care where I did my clinicals, or a job in cardiothoracic surgery, which would be a self-defined dream job. I took the latter, and I had a sharp learning curve to get comfortable with the acute care world, including ICU rounding, procedures, and first assisting in the operating room, which, side note, guys, nurse practitioners don't typically do. If there's first assisting, it's often with a PA, but that was a side note. I later obtained my DNP from Mennonite, the same school, in 2016, and thought I was done. I decided to get my, AGACNP as a postmaster certificate in 2020 from UPenn, since it was apparent there had been some discussion about scope creep with me having an FNP while being in an acute care setting. Pause, let me translate. He had his NP credentials was family nurse practitioner, which enables you to care for people, across the lifespan, but often in a outpatient setting. So if you're working in acute care, they typically want you to have the nurse practitioner education degree that is specific to acute care. So that's why he was like, I probably need to get this additional certificate to be able to safely ensure that I'm not going to lose my job to someone else who has this credential and I don't. All right, resuming his quote. Many hospital area employers since 2020 have not even considered FNPs for hospital-based care due to this trend, so I felt like it was worth my time and energy. I did find the FNP training did not prepare me, nor should it have, for hospital medicine, so I had a great deal of training to undergo to be prepared for the privileges of a CV surgery role. This uphill battle is one of the main reasons why I founded Skills on Point, his nursing education company, to help others have easier access to these skills. People routinely say the same thing about going back for a DNP, and I always say the same thing. In 2 years from now, you will be 2 years older. You might as well be called doctor on your birthday in 2 years. So you can learn more about John at skillsonpoint.com. Again, I'll put a link to his description. And if you're considering any NP stuff and you want to get better at skills, he's got phenomenal resources and in-person courses. He's such a good teacher. I can't say enough good things about him. So I would put links to him. So let's round this out. Is a DNP right for you? So there's no one size all fits answer that fits here. Okay. What really matters is asking yourself where you want to end up and whether that DNP is going to get you closer to that. So those key questions I want you to ask yourself is, do I want to stay in direct patient care long term, or am I feeling more pulled to leadership, education, or system level impact? Am I energized by things like research, translation, quality improvement, or policy change? Or do I feel like I just should do the DNP because everybody's talking about it? If you're considering this degree just because it sounds impressive, I encourage you to pause and think about your work setting, role, and lifestyle and what you want that to look like in 5 years. Where do you see yourself working? Or who are you serving? What kind of difference are you making? And that is why I have that reflection tab in the nursing school planner. It helps you really write that kind of stuff out and come to that decision. Okay. The truth is that a DNP is a fantastic goal for the right nurse at the right time. And it's totally okay to say, you know what, that's not what I need right now, or not what I see. Or maybe I might want that, but not today. There's no gold star for like rushing through your career. This is about alignment and not achievement for achievement's sake. I want to say that again. It is about alignment, not achievement for achievement's sake. I also don't want you to get into this thing where, well, I want to have the option to work in as many roles as possible. So I want to get DNP with FNP and mental health and what else is there? Other certifications and things and CNS and all this so I could do any job I want ever. Like, there's a point where it's like, okay, am I just pursuing all this education just to delay decision making? Like, while we want to be marketable, we don't need to be hyper marketable and appropriate for every single job possible. That can keep you in school, acquiring debt, and not getting to the point of, all right, I'm done with school and here I am ready to work. And I think that can be a really hard transition for some people who are career academics. And it's hard to go from the place of, let me get all this information in case I want to do this, in case I want to do this. And next thing you know, you're in your early 40s and have been in school the whole time and have hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And even if you got whatever job, oh, Lord knows if you're ever going to be able to pay it all down, because we've gotten all these different things. And I don't want you to delay decision making for that. At some point, you do need to say, okay, this is what I'm going to go with. It makes the most sense. Let's make a decision and move forward. And if that is hard, let's make the decision and then let's focus on the baby steps right after it. You know, the applications and these little, like, small steps to feel like we're making progress towards our goal. So let's wrap it up, guys. DNP is a clinical terminal degree designed for nurses who want to stay in practice, but also lead, teach, and drive change at a higher level. It is not required for every advanced role, but it is becoming more common. And if you see yourself wanting to work in leadership capacities and provider capacities in competitive settings or academic settings, teaching at the graduate level, or move into executive leadership, this might be a good idea. Okay. You can become a nurse practitioner with your MSN, and that's totally valid. But if you're thinking long term, DNP might give you a good edge, especially in competitive markets. We also discussed that difference between DNP, DNAP for future CRNAs. Remember, regardless of whichever pathway you choose, you're going to have to do a DNP project, not a dissertation. And we want to make sure that this is a decision that you make based on guys, I'm stumbling over my words. Okay, let's regroup here. I want this decision should not be something that you make based on what's trendy, what other people expect. If 4 nurses on your unit are going back for their DNP and they just look so smart and whatever, doing all their DNP work, and you feel like you should do it so that you can be considered competent. No, this is a huge decision and a lot of money. it should be aligned with your goals and your vision and what you want your career to look like in 5 or 10 years. You might not be working with those people in 5 to 10 years. Actually, probably won't, because they're going to DNP school. But like, you could move, you could have the certain things happen. And I don't want you to get locked into something financially and with a time commitment that's not fully aligned with where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years. Don't forget to snag that nursing school planner workbook at freshrn.com/planner. That will help you sort through things. You can compare programs, track cross, reflect on what kind of job and life that you're building, because that's what you're doing when we're talking graduate school. And remember that when you do get that, put in your email. I'm going to send you that. And then over a few weeks, I'm going to just send you some encouraging and educational emails about picking the right programs. And I also have a full blog post about online DNP programs that really kind of accompanies this episode. So I will put a link to that in the description of this episode. But if you go to freshrn.com/nursing-degrees, you can check that out there. I also kind of reorganized my website so it's a little easier to navigate. So if you go to FreshRN and you hit the menu, I have learning hubs. And the first one is nursing degrees and programs. And you can click on that and see all the different posts I have on different degrees and considerations for that. So thank you guys for hanging out with me today. I hope it made this feel a little bit more understandable. You've got this. Feel free to drop comments and questions. I'm happy to answer them. Thanks, nurses. Stay fresh.